Hey everyone, we're back for Kushner's Chapter 3. Sometimes there's no reason. And it kind of gets into the idea of chaos. Can you accept the idea that some things happen for no reason and that there's randomness in the universe? Some people can't handle that idea, and even in some of your reflections, I noticed like you couldn't let go of the idea of like it has to happen for a reason, and like that's sometimes it just doesn't. And I know we try to fit these square pegs into these round holes, um, but it doesn't work that way. I'm just kind of moving through here. um, I see on page 55, it was really cool talking about the butterfly effect, where you have one incident cascades into a whole other series of incidents, and there's no way to tell which one mattered and which one didn't. And so much of what we're looking to try to be able to capture is um, things that we just can't, like a hurricane that happens, right? If some of it blows out to sea and some of it hits land, and there are plenty of different variables. And if we had an infinite number of minutes to be able to decipher all those variables, then we probably could figure it out. We probably could figure out, but we just don't, and there are just too many. And so we don't know which way a hurricane will go, but we'll talk more about those hurricanes in a minute. Um, he in page 56 talks about that woman who was hit her car into a telephone pole and wrapped it around, and she says, now I know there's a God. If I come out of that alive in one piece, must be because he's looking out for me up there. And Kushner goes on to say, that's great for you, and I'm not going to stop you from thinking that is some connection to God, but what about the guy um, who was a young father, and he was killed in a car accident in the same place? Are we suspecting that God didn't want to help that man, but wanted to help you? And if that were the case, how what would be the rhyme or the reason for one versus another? That's not really a God that I would be interested in, right? Sometimes it is just random, and there are things that happen that we just are just too many variables. Where on the road did she spin out, and where in the road did he spin out, and what kind of car, and what kind of structural integrity for each car? Like, I mean, they're all a million variables, and if we could figure them all out, we'd be all set, but we just can't. Um, he talks about um, sometimes he talked about the rope bridge on page 57, how there doesn't seem to be any accidents. But what if that were 200 people instead of 5 people on a rope bridge? What about 200 people in the air, to suggest that all of them were at some transition in their life that made it okay that they died in that plane crash? Usually, when we figure out all the situations with these people who died on the plane, we just find that not to be the case. That there isn't some kind of like plan for why they all died at one time. Looking to page 59, he talks about the creation story, and he talks about creation as not being making something from nothing, but he says that what it means to create is to make order out of chaos, right? Things that we don't understand or we didn't understand, and we're taking all those things and we're turning them into something special. And he said, just like a poet, right, or a creative writer, he doesn't make new words. He just takes the words that we all know, and he orders them in such a way that we've never heard before and are very beautiful. And so it's with God, and that God fashions a world that was total chaos, and he creates order. He creates us. He creates planets. He creates stars, and all these things that are um, that are ordered, and we make more and more order as we go. And turning to page 60 says that most of the time the events in the universe follow firm natural laws. And though that's the order, right? And it used to be where like we looked for miracles, and that was all well and good, except that those miracles, they don't really happen. But what we've developed now is we understand what those miracles were. An eclipse to the ancients was some kind of special divine sign, but for us, we know that it's just the planets and the sun and the moon all align, and an eclipse happens. So we learn more about it. That doesn't mean that there isn't any faith anymore. It just means that we suddenly get it. We suddenly understand that there's a lot more order to the world than we ever thought. We learn that this is like that analogy of the football game where you have um, where you had the person learning about football. At first, they were just a bunch of guys running into each other. And now you're learning the intricacies of the game. And the more and more you learn the order and the way it's played, the more interesting it is, and the more complex it is, and the more amazing that sport could be, right? So it doesn't, even though it takes away some of the things you didn't know, that doesn't make it less valuable. In some senses, you can start to appreciate the complexity of it. And the same thing with like a hurricane, right? Here comes that hurricane. Um, in the 1910, you might have hundreds of people out on the beach in Florida, and a hurricane suddenly hits. There was no way to know. But then maybe I remember in the 1980s where they would say, okay, there's a hurricane coming and it's going to hit maybe from Florida to Miami up to Newport Beach. And so you had this wide span of the eastern coast that had to be careful, but you knew when and you knew kind of where. Now they pinpoint these things by like county. They know exactly who has to evacuate, right? And so they save lives and millions of dollars because we have created that order. We've helped to create. God is working in some senses through us, and that's where he kind of leaves that at the end of the chapter, where he says, "System left to itself may evolve in the direction of randomness, but on the other hand, our world may not be a system left to itself." And that's us. We are creating things like medicines, and we are creating things that give order to things that we had no control over before. And more um, we experience life, the more and more we have order over in it. And that's what creation really was. And so that's just the randomness of life. And we have to accept it, that sometimes that not everything is some kind of plan. Okay, cool. All right, that's chapter 3.